My name is Andrea Farnham. I'm running for County Commissioner in District 8. I largely center most of the things that I look at in terms of being a candidate and what's going on in Athens. What are the problems that exist in Athens? They center around inequality. They center around poverty. They center around a lot of predation. So relationships that exist where landlords exploit their residents, where bosses exploit their employees, where sort of the people that have stuff get to exploit the people who don't have stuff. And I don't think that's the best way that Athens can be. I think it can be better than that. And I think there's a lot of solutions that exist to that. And so that's in part why I would like to be county commissioner, so that I can help kind of get rid of this exploitation and make Athens whole, so that all of us get to, have free, meaningful lives.
Mr. Holt?
Okay, I didn't hear you. Yeah, I'm Kamayu Hull. I'm also a candidate for commissioner in District 8. I am the only candidate in this race that is from Clark County and knows this community. And so it's vitally important to me that everybody in this community have access to the local government, that we have allies from different parts of the community when we're talking about making decisions on behalf of everybody in the community, and that we're accountable to the entire community and not just a subsection of our constituency kind of running the show. To me, and on the east side in particular, that looks like focusing on unity, equity, and justice. And we'll talk more about all of those things as we get along, but I'm happy you all invited me to debate here in this forum. And to learn more about me, you can visit my website at www.kamayuhull.com.
Thank you both for being here and participating. So we'll jump right into our next question. So what is a false assumption that you think many people may have about you? Maya, do you want to start with this one, and then we'll go on to Andrew?
Sure. Believe it or not, I think a lot of people have the impression that because of my career path and because I'm well-spoken, that I've just grown up wanting to be a career politician. In fact, my candidate in the last race for the Board of Education said as much. This is essentially a young budding career politician that is trying to cut his teeth on a Board of Education race. And, I think that, first of all, that's not true. Yes, I am involved in politics. Yes, I have entered a number of races, but no, it's not because I want to see myself as a budding politician and use the local government as a stair step to something bigger. It's quite frankly because I don't see any local politicians that represent my interests in the way that I believe they should be represented. I see our politicians leaving out a good portion of the community that I grew up in and grew up with. And my family is included in that larger community. So I think a lot of people kind of look at me and say, he wants to be a politician. No, that's not it at all. I want to make sure that my community is served on a local level the way that it's supposed to be served.
Interesting. And that's a really good question for me. I would like to pretend that people do not have lots of false assumptions about me. If I had to pinpoint one, I would say that I'm very passionate about ideas. I love to debate ideas. Because I'm interested in what's true. And I'm not convinced that we've found it. I'm not convinced that people know what they think they know. And so I am very open to, exploring all the ideas, things we've never thought of, things that are controversial, things that are, sort of taboo that people don't want to talk about. I mean, I'm a sex therapist for a reason. I like taboo things. I'm interested in things that other people are uncomfortable with. That is part of what makes me tick. I have always had this fascination with like, well, why can't we talk about that? Well, why not? And that just translates to every aspect of my life, to be honest. And I think that's probably one of the ones that gets misunderstood the most, is that sort of my passion for like contesting ideas gets, honestly, really maliciously misinterpreted, that I'm kind of intentionally trying to like hurt people or, make people feel bad or whatever. Because, when you contest ideas that make people uncomfortable, you evoke a lot of feelings, would you believe? So yeah, I think I care about our city being more whole. And I think that there's no path to that doesn't involve like white people examining their whiteness. It's impossible. The history of our entire country is laced with, pathological whiteness. And I don't think that has to be the case. I think we can do better. I think we can grow and change. And there's no reason for us to hold on to sort of those ways of being. And I'm very sort of passionate about us, confronting that. And I think the only way up is through. I don't know if there's any other way. Maybe there is, but I don't think so. But so I think that that's one of the things that often gets misconstrued or disingenuously misinterpreted.
Thank you both for sharing that. What is an example of a political perspective of yours that has changed or developed over time? So starting off with, where were you at first on the issue, and kind of where are you now? How has that view changed or developed at all?
Do you want to go, Kamayu, or?
You can start on this one.
Oh, you're muted. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
there
it
you
doesn't matter, but I think it's your turn to go first.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to be out of order.
Okay. Thank you. So great. I used to be if you can believe it, a hardcore Republican, uber conservative, like fundamentalist Christian, anti-gay everything, honestly, anti-interracial marriage, like all the stuff, super, 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 super way over here. So all of my political views have changed. So there's very few that are still where they were. But if I had to probably pick the largest ones that have changed, I would probably say stuff related to like same-sex, probably relationships maybe, that I used to be like against, like I just grew up, I was indoctrinated, like I just grew up around like, and then once I like left and got exposed to like thinking, I changed my ways of interacting in the world. So I used to think very differently about relationships. Honestly, I had no idea how to think about people at all. So it's unsurprising that I had, views about relationships needed to look a certain way. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I could go into.
Facilitated that shift as a follow-up question. You'll get this as well.
Sure. Thinking, reading. I had mentors who exposed me to good books. It was grad school. When I started my master's. Literally my first class in my master's. But I think some of the groundwork was laid like in my undergrad with some of my psych professors. But undergrad, to be honest, I had my first Black male like professor. And he was this like awesome dude from like Haiti who was this like radical thinker, like free person. And I was like, oh, you're awesome. How do I be like you? And he was like, read this stuff on whiteness because you're super white and racist. And I was like, oh, what, me? No, I love everyone. He's like, no, you don't. You're super racist. So he kind of exposed me to like literature, and then I've had other mentors along the way. So mentors, good books, and being exposed to ideas and like wrestling through it to where like this idea doesn't sustain scrutiny. Like the more I think about it, the less it makes sense. Like it made no sense to keep believing that like good marriage meant you have to be heterosexual. Like that's stupid. like the more you think about it, that's completely absurd. It's not the structure of the relationship or the gender of the people in the relationship that make it good. The more you think about that, the less sense it makes, and you really can't examine it, and reason is like the relevant standard that kind of, the more you think about it, the harder it is to hold on to something that's completely illogical.
Kick it to you, Mr. Hall.
Probably my stance on undocumented residents. I think initially I resented the fact that the plight of undocumented residents was so closely aligned with the plights of minorities such as myself that it began to overtake and really receive more focus than the issues of citizens such as myself. I think working in the juvenile courts and working with some families that were undocumented and that had issues that were completely separate from the types of issues that I face as a Black man in Athens, Georgia, but yet, had some similarities, opened my eyes to the fact that undocumented residents are really struggling here in Athens, Clarke County. Also being open-minded about the plights of people that aren't like yourself. I've never been an undocumented resident in Athens, Clarke County. I've only been a Black man in Athens, Clarke County. So I can tell you all day about my experiences and why, things weren't fair or there wasn't equal treatment with regards to me. But I really had to get to a place where I was open to hearing an undocumented resident's perspective on how some similar issues right here within our community just affected their family completely differently. You're muted.
You're right. I am. Thank you. Thank you both for those answers. And now I'll say we're moving into kind of a layer deeper. We're opening this onion a little bit further. We'll say that those were the softball questions thus far. So just kind of easing our way in here. What do you believe you have seen the Mayor and Commission do right in this county? What are some existing efforts that you are looking to support? And Kamayu, this will be your time to begin. So we're starting off with the positives here before we get even deeper into this.
Well, I think the commitment towards renewable energy is a step in the right direction. I think we have some different priorities that renewable energy can play into, but I do like to see that as a step in the right direction. I think that the prosperity package was a step in the right direction. My only concern about those types of steps and the progressive avenue that the mayor and commission seem to be going in at present is the detail, or rather the lack of detail for things like the prosperity package and their commitment to renewable energy. I think those things need to be a lot more fleshed out by the mayor and commission.
Pause 1 second. If you are not speaking, would you please mute yourself? I'm hearing a little bit of feedback here. Sorry about that.
I am as well. I thought it was me.
Yes, no, I think I'm seeing the 706-340 number popping up, which usually means it's picking up sound. If you would make sure that you're muted.
But yeah, so take for instance the prosperity package. They voted for it. It seemed like a good idea. The money was set aside. It was funded, but there wasn't really a plan for what we were going to do with this money, how we were going to measure whether or not the prosperity package was actually working or not working. There was no detail about how or if we were tracking how this money is recirculating within our community, whether we're using it for long-term residents, short-term residents, the effects of the prosperity package on the building of wealth within our community. So there was just a lot more questions. I applaud the efforts in progressing towards things that definitely need to happen, but the detail in terms of how those things were going to get done and what we were really looking at to determine our success or failure was just, they made me uncomfortable.
Thank you. Ms. Farnham?
Wait, sorry, find the unmute button. What do they have done well? Elect Mariah, that was wonderful, well done. I have been very happy with the Office of Operational Analysis, the auditor's office. Stephanie Maddox is a rock star. She's wonderful. She does her job very well. And I'm very happy that we had a commission that had the foresight to create that office. Not every local government has an auditor's office. So the structure of implementing that and having an office that follows finances, where money goes, I think that is beautiful. I think we should fund it more, give her more people, give her all the resources, update her technology so she or he or whoever in the future is doing that job can do their job, because it matters to good governance that you have an office that is, following the money and following the operations and making sure you're doing what you're supposed to. There are I would echo a little bit of what Kamayu said. There are ways in which our commission has started to do some good things. So for example, started to support the Linentown resolution. They get real close to doing good things and then get a little scared. And there's just not enough of them yet to have courage to do hard things, like support something like that. And that's something I would hope for in the future. And again, I think the prosperity package had promise, but again, I'm always discouraged when there isn't hard content attached to something. You pass something in name, but you haven't really attached it to what does that mean really, and wrestled through what's that for. I didn't think it was enough, and then we saw how fast that was snatched away too. So I have issues with that too. But things they've done well. I'm thinking of this year specifically, but I'm also thinking of last year or the year before, some other things that they've done. Yeah, that's all I can think of. I'm sure there's more, but I struggle, to be honest. I struggle to think of things that I'm really proud of that they've done. I think that's really sad. I think they have hard jobs. I think it's hard to run a city and run it well and make a city whole, but we have really big problems in Athens. We have really big problems. And to be quite frank, we have not had a commission that is up to the task yet, historically or presently. So.
And I want to hear more from both of you on that point. But since you both named the prosperity package, I was hoping that we could kind of tease that a little bit more. In the sense of, I guess, what are some changes or kind of how would you have liked to see the prosperity package roll out, or where did you see us kind of going wrong in that process, if that makes sense? And for the sake of not having to add another question, feel free to speak to the SPLOST as well. Both of those, I think, in recent years have been more contentious than they have been historically. Well, the prosperity package being a new idea, but as far as people's initial response being like, this is great, what an opportunity. And then once it gets further down the line, then we're all kind of biting our fingernails like, wait, what happened here? So whichever one you feel more passionately about or you've been following a bit more closely. I believe, Andrea, did we start with you last time? Now I've lost track of the order.
I think I just ended that last one.
Yes, okay.
So I think Kamayu went first. Is that right? Last time?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you want to
So
begin with that, yeah.
Briefly on the prosperity package, you know, I mean, we're talking about measures that address poverty, okay? And so you cannot come up with any measures that address poverty if you're not talking about labor, if you're not talking about jobs, if you're not talking about contracts, if you're not talking about how to create pipelines for people to be able to put money in their pockets, and not like in a way that fosters dependence where you're stuck relying on me to put things in your pocket, but where you get your own things in your pocket. We want to foster like self-determination, self-governance, where people are, you know, working their own jobs and taking care of their own self, and not but they can't do that when there aren't avenues, when you have massive like low-paying jobs. So with something like the prosperity package, I would want it to center on, you know, creating a worker center, and you know, even the neighborhood leaders idea, I love that idea for strategic things like, where are the pipelines that exist to the employers who are, you know, we need a power analysis of Athens, and we need to look at who the employers are, where are the points of discretion, and how we intervene in those points of discretion to literally redistribute money, get these contracts in Black-owned businesses and in residents. And something like a prosperity package could go to funding, you know, that kind of thing, funding a worker center, funding a organizing in the communities for, you know, neighborhoods to ask for what they need, and neighborhoods to be in charge of their own, you know, making their demands to the government. Like, I love the Lennon residents organizing to demand from our commission what they want. They should get to do that, and they should come, and our commission should listen to them. When it comes to the SPLOST, I'm not a fan of regressive taxes. So we have the LOST, L-O-S-T, local option sales tax that goes to the general fund. And then we have three, the T-SPLOST, transportation, education, SPLOST, E-LOST or whatever, and then the SPLOST, the special purpose local option sales tax that just passed. And it just tends to be a money grab for people who are wealthy in Athens. And they pass a few small projects to, you know, make everyone go, yay, like the library. And then it's a huge money grab for things that I'm not sure make the community better. Like, I don't think we need a courthouse. I don't think we need to fund a classic center. That's something they can fund themselves. They can bond it out, borrow the money. Like, my taxes do not need to go to that. Like, that's absurd. I mean, first of all, they asked for this much. We said no. They said, oh, wait, well, oops, we found half of it. And then they came back and asked for some more. And then the whole way that process went, where they had like 4 times to present in front of the mayor and commission, everyone else had like twice. Like, just the whole thing was, you can tell the whole thing was designed to like benefit some people and not benefit other people. So I would really want that process scrutinized, probably audited, to be quite frank. I would love the auditor's office to audit all the SPLOSTs, how those go, how those decisions are made. I want to follow the money, because I do not trust any of that process. I think there's way too many secret handshakes on the golf course meetings where decisions are made about money. And then there's all this theater so that we like pretend to have this committee that's making decisions that at the end of the day, their decisions are not listened to, and it's ends up not being what it was purported to be. So not a fan of the SPLOST. To be honest, if we can't find better ways to spend it, I am totally in favor of nixing the whole thing. I would be in favor of more creative things, like a, some kind of like commuter tax. You know, it's a little bit colonial, the way that our money flows out of the county. We're the #1 employer for a lot of surrounding counties. That's fine. People get to live wherever they want. But, you should pay a little because all the services that you enjoy because you work here, but then you take all of our money and you go spend it outside in surrounding counties. So I'm glad we're supporting the surrounding counties, but, we need stuff. And I think it's okay to ask that you pay a little pittance here for to help the county that, keeps you alive. You're welcome. So, yeah.
Was that where you? Thank you
So,
very much.
can you hear me?
Yes.
So I actually think that the prosperity package and all of the SPLOS they have kind of opposite problems. I think that the majority of the issue with the prosperity package is that we did not first go to the community that needed that prosperity package the most and identify what issues they were having to see what this money was going to address. We essentially set money aside and said, yay, we're going to do great things for poor people, but we really didn't. There was no investment in seeing what issues that we could even address and then discussing how those specific pots of money would be set aside to address those issues. SPLOS, on the other hand, first of all, I'm in favor of SPLOS. I was on the eSPLOS 2016 committee and, wrote a letter to the newspaper in favor of it and why we actually need all of the SPLOS. But I think to understand that, you have to understand, yes, it very well may be a regressive tax, but all of the SPLOS were intended to fix the gap between what we can bring in our general fund just based on our property taxes, based on the taxes that we as a county can collect, given the fact that so many nonprofits, so many churches, and so many universities own a good majority of our land. Balancing that with the fact that a good majority of our economy is based on tourism and University of Georgia football and the hotels and that whole college town scene. So having the different SPLOS in place, I think in its initial conception was put in place to bridge that gap. Hey, look at there. I think we got away from using that as a bridge to cover the things that it was initially intended for, being the stress and the extra stress and strain that our community suffers due to University of Georgia and the economic tourism of Georgia sports. We got away from funding those projects, and then we started doing other projects that to a lot of this community were more beautification efforts and things that the majority of this community really didn't find useful in their everyday lives and with the things that they were struggling with. You're talking about the difference between paving our roads and building firefly trails, or the difference between building sidewalks and bike lanes. So I think we got away from the original intent of what the SPLOS should have been focused on. And now we're doing, we're doing projects that satisfy a certain segment of our community, but that the community as a whole and at large can't really use and has no use for. That being said, I think the SPLOS has the opposite problem in that there is a community involvement aspect of it that only involves a small subset of the community. And so I think the mayor and commission recognized, hey, we went to the community for projects. We got projects that, came back and weren't the things that we thought should have been priorities. So we're just going to take this out of the community engagement purview and assign what we really see as priorities within the city. And whether you think that was right or wrong is beside the point. The point is we're not using the SPLOST for what it was intended for. And I think the mayor and commission were at a point where they recognized that and begin to do some things that were different. And that upset a lot of people that had invested their time in choosing those community projects. But yeah, so I would flip them. I would do more of the community investment and community input. And I would select the most impoverished communities to survey and to get input from where the prosperity package is concerned. And then I would focus on what that community says are their issues. In terms of the SPLOST, I would do the exact opposite. And yes, take community input, but prioritize those projects that everybody in our community can use, as opposed to the things that only small subsets of our community really cares about.
Muted again. Thank you both for those thorough answers. So this next question is kind of the other half of this coin of, what have you seen the mayor and commission do right? But I guess, what are some specific decisions or actions of our local government that you personally would have done differently? So I know, Kamai, you just spoke a little bit to differences in SPLOST and prosperity package, but just wanted to give you all an opportunity to name any other specific actions that constituents would have seen a different response from you.
So there are a couple of things. Number one, I'm glad we finally did something in terms of the courthouse, but were I on the commission, that would have been a much higher priority a whole lot sooner. We work in courts all across this state, and Athens-Clarke County is 30 years plus behind a lot of the other places that we practice in. Our juvenile court here is literally in the basement. There's not room for the adequate administration of one of the, what I consider to be one of the most vital courts in our community, because it deals with our children. And so, yeah, that would have came a whole lot sooner. That would have been a higher priority long ago. It would have been a higher priority than the jail. That being said, East Side Library, equity for the East Side, I think we haven't paid as much attention to the East Side as we should have. And as a result, our quality of life here on the East Side has started to diminish as other sections of town grow. You look at Epps Bridge, you look at Atlanta Highway and that corridor, you look at Highway 29 in that corridor, and you see new development and burgeoning businesses and things kind of taking off. And you slowly see the East Side continuing to kind of taper off and die. You see restaurants leaving, you see shopping areas leaving, and it's because we haven't focused on the East Side in terms of building that infrastructure to grow business on this side of town and building the developments that attract the type of businesses that improve our quality of life on this side of town. So that definitely would have been a focus of mine if I were on the mayor and commission.
Thank you. Andrea?
Right, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things I would have done differently. Just, philosophically, I am a therapist, so everything is about meaning and freedom, and that the government is supposed to secure your rights and enable your freedom as a citizen, and not just the rights of a few, but the whole polity. So when you're on the mayor and commission, you're supposed to make decisions with the whole in mind. And what does it mean to think about the whole polity in Athens? When we historically have always had two cities, one city, one part of the constituency that gets thought about and that whose rights are secured and freedoms are enabled through the decisions that are made, and then the other half that whose rights are not secured and whose freedoms are not enabled by the decisions that we make. And you know who matters by who gets money spent on them. And so one thing I would do very differently is budgets. The way that the mayor and commission votes and decides budgets, I find it really atrocious. I would do something much more akin to some kind of participatory budgeting. Right now, pretty much the manager decides what the budget is, gives it to the mayor and commission, and then they just like give it a thumbs up, and that's how it goes. I'm really shocked that grown people are not more creative than this. There's so much wiggle room and discretion in how we do the budget in terms of what we could come up with. I'm pretty sure that, 5 or 6 smart people can put their heads together and come up with some much more fun, creative, and interesting ways to spend our money. So there's one thing I would do really differently. So back when, we had this police officer who just decided that running over Black people was easier than getting out and arresting them. And then the police chief fired this officer, and then this officer decided to sue the city. And then our manager decided to fire the police chief, and then our mayor and commission voted to give this officer $250,000 or something along those lines, something like that. I would do none of those things. First of all, if the manager fires a police chief without informing the commission, I would fire the manager. I would not renew the manager's contract after a decision like that, because you're making a decision that you should not be making. Even if it's within your purview in terms of like legally, you're allowed to make that decision. As a manager, that's not the kind of decision that you should make without talking to the mayor and commission. That shows a very problematic relationship for me between the manager and the mayor and commission. And as a commissioner, I would not vote to settle that lawsuit. I would take it to court. Make the case for why it's okay for you to run over this Black person. I want to hear you make it publicly. I want that case to be tried. I don't want a mayor and commission that's afraid to be sued for doing what is the right thing. I don't know all the details of the case, but we need a lawyer who isn't scared to try cases, and who, especially on issues that we're talking about, what's the right thing and what's the right way to treat people, and what kind of message are you sending to who in Athens gets to get run over and who doesn't. So that's a decision I would do very differently. I have some very different ideas about how that should have gone down. And freedom is the ability to make plans and actualize plans. So if I want to play soccer, I get to play soccer because the enabling conditions, there's a league or a team, there's other people that want to play, there's a place I can buy equipment, I have money, I have discretionary time, someone can watch my kids, so I can go do it. So I can make a plan in my head in the abstract, and then I can make it real because there's the conditions for me to do that. Many Athenians do not have that. With the high poverty rate that we have, they can make plans, maybe, but they don't have the conditions to enable those. And there's a lot of decisions that this mayor and commission and previous ones, it's not specific to this one, make that do not center how to make sure more people can make and actualize their plans. So when we're making decisions about things like SPLOST, again, to what Kamayu mentioned before, when you're making decisions to, put a trail through somewhere, the Firefly Trail, but you haven't consulted the residents that live around there. Do you know what happened when we put that trail in? Housing values went up and it displaced people. And so if we were going to do that, we needed to do some kind of rent freeze, some kind of something, so that people who live there weren't displaced. And they were. I was talking to somebody 2 weeks ago whose whole family had to move because the rent tripled, she said. it was insane. At least doubled. I was trying to think from when she said like 1 year to the next year, how much it might have been tripled in 2 years. I can't remember it specifically, but more than doubled to where it went from like $500 to like $1,000. And then they couldn't live there anymore. So if we're going to make decisions and vote one way, because people should get to have trails and get to walk on trails, I have no issue with that. You have to think about who else is impacted by that and how we protect. The people also should get to live where they want to live and not be displaced just because somebody wants to walk their dog. So I think that where they fail in the decisions that they're making is they fail to extend personhood to more than just the immediate people they're thinking about for this like decision. So when they're making a decision about a trail, they're like, cool, people should get trails and trails are nice and we all like trails, yay. And they don't do the further, deeper work that needs to happen, which is like, all right, how is this going to impact the people that live here? How is this going to impact people who, we have to think about people who don't walk on trails too, even if we're voting to put a trail in, because, you know, I don't know, we should put trails in, that's fine. But people should also keep their houses. And if it's going to displace people's houses, that might be more important than putting your trail in. And we might have to tell you, like, wait till next time, or we'll find a better place to put it, or sorry, like, we don't put it in here because these other people we think should get to keep their house. So I don't know, you have to make hard decisions, and you can't, you have to weigh it all. And I guess I would hope that we could get better at thinking about the whole when we're making decisions.
And as we go into our final questions, we're going to turn up to a nice boil now for our final question. So this is a question that was submitted. District 8 is 30% Black and has 3 schools with majority Black students: Cedar Shoals, Hillsman, and Gaines School. Athens has a history of severe inequality and high poverty, 35%. Largely racial inequality, from racialized poverty to racialized academic achievement. This pandemic will only widen the inequality. What will you do to address this inequality in Athens? No pressure.
Who's first?
Let's see. I think it's going to be Andrea, because she just finished speaking.
Okay.
So you went
Okay, I'll be briefer this time, sorry. I mean, that's absolutely, I mean, that's 100% right. This pandemic is only going to further, I mean, we have no idea the unemployment rate that is happening in Athens right now. We don't have the numbers on that. We don't know how many businesses are going under because of this shelter stay in place thing. And people who were struggling before are only going to be struggling worse. And so there's a way in which my platform addressed these issues before, because I have always centered labor, economics, jobs, and racial disparities, because I have always understood this to be the central problem in Athens. And this pandemic, any type of crisis just heightens the problems that pre-existed. So if you as a candidate were irrelevant before because you had misidentified the problems, and then a crisis happens, you shift your focus to, oh wait, like what now are the relevant issues, versus if you understood the problem correctly before, the pandemic just confirms that, like, yes, this has always been the thing. I've always understood this, and I've always seen that this has been the central thing, and it's only exacerbated by a pandemic. So yes, how are we going to get people jobs? How are we going to get money in people's pockets? How are we going to examine our, procurement process and center getting getting contracts for businesses that are Athenian owned? Like, local Black-owned businesses need 30% of the contracts because there's a way in which making whole our racial history, if you've been disproportionately shut out for 400 years, then you should be disproportionately included, I don't know, for the next at least 400 years. And I don't see that as giving anyone extra. I see it as making whole the injustices of the past. That we need to center the Black workforce. That how do we get people wages and a say in their work conditions? And how do we get SPLOST projects centered in the communities with the most need? How do we get the procurement process centered? And how, again, something else I want audited. I want everything audited. So the first thing I would do is fund the hell out of the auditor's office and give her lots of work to do. Because I want to see everything. I want to see the P cards. I want to see how we spend money and where and how and better ways that we can spend it. Because I think we can spend it better, and I think that there are solutions to these problems. I do not think that Athens has to be full of racial inequality for the next 400 years. We need a 20-year plan to make the Black community whole. And we have to sit down, map it out. How are we going to grow wealth in this community with a seriousness that isn't $4 million here to, you know, give you an Easter egg hunt. We need serious plans, like serious plans. And I'm tired of people pretending that like poverty is part of the scenery and there's nothing we can do about it and this is just how it is. Because we know exactly how to build wealth because we've built it in white communities over the last like 200 years. We know exactly how money works. Let's stop pretending that we don't. We're just not willing. We're just not willing. Like the white community is not willing to let go of some of their wealth and redistribute it. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a mayor and commission that has some spine, that's willing to create a workers center, that's willing to center issues of you know, race and labor. We need a white history museum. We need a like white terrorist museum like downtown that talks about, there's this beautiful book written about the white Klan in Athens. It's beautiful and amazing. It lists all the institutions that still currently exist and operate that were centers of like Klan recruitment, the churches, the newspapers, the everything. So all the dirt.
What book?
Yeah, so I mean that's we need a 20-year plan to make the Black community whole, and a serious plan that isn't like scared to talk about race. Like, how are we going to teach these kids to read? How are we going to get their parents jobs? How are we going to get pipelines instead of like school to prison pipeline, school to job pipeline for these like Black young people? The jobs exist. Before this pandemic, the unemployment rate was 3.3 or 4, so everybody's working. We have just normalized like bosses exploiting labor and not paying their people. And we have to change that culture. So I would start actually with the ACC government, making them the model employer, forcing them to be the first one to like, all right, get your house in order. Like let's everyone paid leave, paid family leave for everyone, wages at $20 an hour. Like let's show you how it's done and then make it a model for all the other businesses in town and pressure the institutions, the hospitals, the university, you know, a tenants union, a service workers union, things like that. Like workers, giving workers power is only good for Athens. So that's all.
Thank you. And what was the name of that book you were talking about?
It's called Behind the Mask of Chivalry. It's by Nancy McLean. She's actually a UGA historian. She did a beautiful, beautiful job. She wrote a book called The Mask of Chivalry, The Rise of the Second Ku Klux Klan. Nancy McLean, she's great. And yeah, you should absolutely read it.
Yeah, thank you. We'll definitely check that out now that I have nowhere to go and nothing else to do with my time. Perfect time to get some good books.
Mm.
Thank you. And over to you, Kamayu.
Okay, so can you repeat the question? Because that was this question covered a lot of different aspects. So I want to make sure I answer it correctly.
Yes. You're right. The question was, oh, it was the question I read. Okay. Caught me slipping. I have forgotten the question myself. All right. So
you know how I feel.
Right, I do. So District 8 is 30% Black and has 3 schools with majority Black students: Cedar Shoals, Hillsman, and Gaines Elementary. Athens has a history of severe inequality and high poverty, largely racial inequality from racialized poverty to racialized academic achievement. this pandemic will only widen the inequality. What will you do to address this inequality in Athens?
Well, pretty much everything that I've said thus far regarding my campaign, making sure that the constituents and the 30% of the Black people in our district have the same access to their local government that the 70% of the white constituents have, making sure that when we're talking about allies in District 8, that we are pulling from the 30% the same way that we are pulling from the 70%. And then making sure that we're accountable to the 30% the same way that we're accountable to the 70%. You know, I don't know if you realize what you read there in the question, but if our district's 30% minority and 70% majority, there's something that is going on between the grades of kindergarten through 12 to flip those numbers when it comes to the student populations in our 3 schools. We need to address that. We need to come together, be unified, like the unified government that we're supposed to have, and have actual honest conversations about why our Caucasian or majority constituents don't think that our schools are good enough for their children to attend. We need to come to an understanding about those things, identify what the issues are, and then go about seeking resolution to those issues so that we rebuild those percentages more in favor of a more diverse school district. You know, Cedar Shoals hasn't always been like that. Any school hasn't always been like that. Hillsman hasn't always been like that. When I was in those schools, you know, it was closer to 50-50. It might have even been 60-40 in favor of Caucasians. And so the diversity of our schools has kind of declined over the years, and that's disturbing. So we need to come together and have some real conversations about why that is and what that means and how we can improve that situation. So that's thing number one. Thing number two that we need to unify on is, I think, how our local mayor and commission work with the school district themselves. When I was growing up, there were a lot of crossover programs that were run in the schools and perhaps through leisure services that were kind of cross-funded by the school district and leisure services for all of the community and all of the kids' goods. That really doesn't exist anymore. So we need to start with having those discussions. And I'm happy to say at this point, it's going to be really, really easy to coordinate that if I am made commissioner, because my wife will be the new school board representative in our district. So, you know, unifying on that front, I think is very, very important. And it's going to be very easy within my household for sure. The other thing is making sure that we're advocating for the equity on the East Side that I mentioned. Yes, a part of the disparities that exist on the East Side are because of an economic situation, but it's also in part because of you know, our feeding into the school to prison pipeline. So making sure that we not only identify a library as a SPLOST project, but making sure that it actually gets built. We identify SPLOST projects all the time that never come to fruition. This is one that we need to make sure actually happens because the East Side needs it, not just in terms of, you know, having another government building and another source of economic driver on the East Side, but also in terms of just needing a place for kids to go after school. Not every school on the East Side has an after school program. And even if they do, you know, some kids don't necessarily qualify to stay at the programs that we have in place, or some kids can't afford to stay at the programs that we have in place. So, you know, putting programming and tutoring in a local library that's on the East Side, you know, I think can't help but improve that situation. Along with that equity for the East Side infrastructure, focusing on the airport. You know, it's just kind of sitting there, and it's a beautiful building. I'm the secretary of the Cedar Creek Civic Association, and we actually have our Civic Association meetings at the airport. Beautiful venue space, but it's kind of like we're the only people that use it, us and University of Georgia football team. So, you know, making sure that we focus on getting commercial passenger service in that airport, making sure that we get access to the airport from the Lexington Road side instead of having to drive all the way through Winterville to get there, and turning the airport into an economic driver for the East Side instead of just a far-reaching building that happens to be, you know, bordering Lexington Road. I think those things are all important to making sure we address some of the disparities that exist within our district, and just helping out the East Side as a whole and Athens-Clarke County as a whole.
Thank you both very much. And as we start wrapping up here, this will be our second to last question. Coming back to you, Kamayu, why should District 8 voters vote for you over the other two candidates?
Well, you're gonna pit us against each other, huh?
Yep.
Well, I mean, if we must, it's because, you know, I'm the bridge. I'm the bridge. I am the person that is in this race that is most connected to the community. And when I say the community, I don't just mean the Black community or the white community, the impoverished community, or the privileged community. I mean, I'm one of the few people in this race that actually floats between, you know, all of the different communities that we have and that are represented on the East Side and represented within Clarke County. I think, you know, when you look at our race, it's first of all, it's the most entertaining race in the district. Let's go ahead and put that out there. The three characters that we have in this race, you know, are
as far as I can see, there's only two, but go on.
So, you know, I think the three candidates that we have are sort of representative of the issues and the factions that exist within Athens-Clarke County. You have one candidate that is sort of establishment and represents the privilege of our district and of our community. And
where is she, by the way?
Apparently so privileged she doesn't have to attend a debate.
With us lowly people, she can't be bothered.
You know, I won't go there, but I will say that, you know, there's the establishment candidate who's seems to be from the more privileged background and represents more of the privileged side of our district. There's the candidate that, you know, although she has the good ideas and although she speaks truth, not a lot of people can hear that because of the manner in which it's communicated. You know, Andrea doesn't hold any punches, and I love her for that, but you know, that's not always palatable to a good portion of our community and a good portion of our district. And then there's me, the candidate that certainly can understand everything that Andrea harps about, certainly understands everything that is important to the other privileged candidate, but also can draw a distinction between what's necessary and what the necessities are for this community, especially in terms of the impoverished and the disenfranchised, and what are the will and the way of the privileged. And somebody that is steeped in the community enough to be able to bring those communities together and help them understand each other and help them communicate in a way that they aren't able to communicate by themselves, and help them articulate and understand what types of resolution might help us all rise as a community, as opposed to being so divisive and being pitted against each other, like you've done in this question, Amani. So I think that's the difference. That's what I offer to this race and to this district and to this city that no other candidate in this race can offer.
Thank you. Andrea?
Thank you, Kamayu. I can appreciate a lot of those things that you are saying. Why should people vote for me? I think that I have a good idea of what good governance is. What we are supposed to be achieving. What is the point of governing in terms of securing rights and enabling freedom? And I think I have a more robust idea of what it means to think about the polity. Think about, you're not going to find another candidate who comes up with the idea to have a debate inside the jail. You're just not. There's a reason that I'm the one that came up with that, because I understand that inmates are people, and I'm going to include them in part of like what it is to be my constituent. Whether you're in jail, whether you're picking up trash, whether you're a neurosurgeon, whether you're the, dean of a fancy, college at UGA, I'm going to think about you the same. You're one of my constituents, and I'm going to think about you. And we need to democratize power. That fundamentally, what needs to happen in Athens is to democratize power, and I think I'm the candidate that is going to help with that. You cannot do that politely. I mean, with all due respect, I love my brother Kamayu. I know his heart is good and he means all of the good things, but I am not convinced that being polite will get us the things that we need. I have yet to see that work, but maybe it will. I think it requires some spine and somebody who's not scared. And I've seen a lot of people try other things, and I have not been convinced that any of those things work, and that we're going to be able to democratize power by asking nicely and being polite and coming to white people and asking them nicely to share power. That there's an aspect of the structure that needs to be reformed to force the sharing of power, and not ask people, but tell people. And I'm not going to ask people. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you that we have to share power, whether you like it or not. But I'm still going to think about you. So just because I'm telling you to share power doesn't mean you stop being a constituent. It means like you matter too, but you don't matter especially. You're not going to have a special place. You're just going to have a regular place with everyone else. And I think we don't have commissioners who are willing to do that, to risk relationships by, telling people that they don't get to matter extra. And we need the political infrastructure in Athens to democratize power. You have to have a communications infrastructure. That means everyone needs internet. That's for the school district, and that's just to be an everyday informed citizen. We have got to get everyone internet, just as a public utility. If the pandemic hasn't highlighted that for you, I don't know what to tell you. That citizens need to have access to tools for their everyday life, whether it's their business, whether it's school, whether it's just their personal life, whether it's their leisure. That part of what it is to democratize power is to get people access to information, so that we have a public channel that everyone can watch mayor and commission meetings, that everyone can have access to information that we can send out. I mean, right now, what would it mean for us to have a communication infrastructure in a pandemic where we could get everyone information, where every candidate, as a matter of governance, the ACC government could make a little video, host some debates, send it out to everyone, so every constituent has access to their candidates. Half 2/3 of the constituents right now are probably just at home trying to keep a roof over their head and feed their kids and not go nuts. They don't have time to, engage politically and follow, this kind of thing. They're trying to survive. They're busy. So, as a government, we have to democratize power by institutionalizing infrastructure and democratizing power. And I think I'm the candidate that understands what that is and understands how to do that. And while some people think that my methods are, unconventional, we've seen what all the conventions get us. They get us exactly what we have. And I think we need something different. And I am definitely different. So there's that. So you can find me at askandrea.com, or not Ask Andrea, AndreaForAthens.com, and you can check out what I'm about and decide for yourself.
And to round out here, I wanted to give you each an opportunity to ask the other person a question. So, Andrea, because you're beginning, it's your turn to begin.
I wasn't ready. Whew. All right.
Yes, we're going from Dr. Phil to Jerry Springer right now. So please.
Okay. Hold on, I gotta get my claws out. Just kidding.
Political Springer, yes.
A question for Kamayu. You're a resident of District 8, so as your commissioner, what would you want me to do for you?
So as a resident of District 8, it'd be great for me if you could drop out of the race so I could win it.
Oh, well played.
Aside from that, though,
I see you.
I really think I would ask all politicians in general, but especially the candidates in this race, to stay in contact with one another, and regardless of who wins this race, we all have different takes on some of the most divisive issues that are facing our communities. And I think that all of our opinions are important. We may not always agree, but I think we can always stay in a place where we can have an open discussion and try and understand each other's perspectives in our pursuit of our larger goals for the local government. So, again, I would want for you to carry forward the same tenets that I deem important to highlight in this race, and that's making sure everybody has access, making sure that you're listening to allies from different parts of this community, and making sure that you're accountable to everybody the same way that I would be.
Okay, thank you.
And your turn, Kamayu. Any questions for Andrea other than to please drop out?
That might have been a bit crass. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Look, I'm grown.
I guess, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm interested to know what your viewpoint is on experience in terms of this race. A lot of the constituents have asked about my experience versus your experience and Carol's experience. And I've had to explain that a lot to the constituents of our district. So, I'd ask that you explain the differences in how you view our experience, both in terms of professionally, how those skills relate to the commission, and in terms of our backgrounds and involvement and interaction in this community.
Sure, very good question. I first of all think that we need to blow up and put in the trash can this idea that anyone has experience making Athens whole. No one does. No one has experience making Athens an ethical community. And we fundamentally misunderstand what experience means. You know, the person who's been married 4 times is more experienced at marriage than the person who's been married once, but that doesn't mean they know how to do it well. The person that has 5 kids, you know, has more than the person that has 1. That doesn't mean that they parent well. And that I do not put the same weight on experience, because you can't just assume that because someone has an experience with something that they have any wisdom. Just because I you know, have never smoked meth doesn't mean as a doctor I couldn't learn how to like treat it. I don't need experiences doing certain things to be good at something. So I don't need to have I'm a therapist. I don't have every experience that my clients have gone through. It's impossible for me to. I'm not them. But I still know how to identify their problem and treat it and solve it. Mariah is the least experienced commissioner, and she's killing it. I trust her more than any commissioner on there. There's people who've been there for 3 terms who are garbage. Andy Herod is garbage. Garbage. Like he's the most like elitist, you know, corporatist, like not good. He's not been good for Athens. And he's had 3 terms of experience. So this idea that you need experience, you don't. Mariah's the best commissioner we have in Athens, and she's the youngest and the least experienced. He is very good at returning emails. And people do like that. So he will be very prompt with an email, and he will get right back to you. He will just keep us poor forever, but that's cool if you're fine with that. So I reject. I think we don't understand what experience is, and that you need experience coupled with like wisdom to interpret the experience. Otherwise, it's kind of meaningless, and nobody has experience in making Athens whole. So I feel like I'm coming in on the same plane as everyone else, and actually a little bit ahead, because I've studied and thought and wrestled through like what an ethical community is and how to make one. And I think to be honest, me and Mariah, we would kill it. Are you kidding? Me and her on the commission, we would rock. It would be fire. Everyone would be coming to mayor and commission meetings because it would be A, so entertaining, but B, like you just wouldn't want to be anywhere else on a Tuesday night because it would be fun. We'd be dropping bombs. I mean, like we would just be like making like everyone smarter and better and like more entertaining, and at least the people that like hate me would still show up to like tell me why I'm wrong, and then we'd have a wonderful debate. And I love to contest ideas. I mean, I love talking to people that don't like me, not because I want to hear like what they think. I'm like, why? And then I want to try to change their mind because I just believe in the human spirit. I believe that people are smart and they can change their minds. But that's a whole other thing. But yeah, I mean, that's what I would say about the experience thing. I mean, I get that all the time. People, first of all, I look 12, so people think that I don't know anything. And I'm constantly underestimated, which, you know, that's fine. But experience doesn't mean what people think it means. So.
Thank you both. I would say you both handled that curveball very well. And now just to close out, I want to give y'all an opportunity to say any final thoughts, your elevator speech, platform, whatever you want to call it, before we head out tonight. Thank you. And I believe we're starting with you this time, Andrea, starting with you.
Okay. I would just say that we have to center Athens first. We have to be selfish in a good way, like as Athenians, that we have to think about keeping Athens' treasure in Athens, centering projects that make Athens whole, and that in everything we do as a commission, we have to make Athens first. That our first priority has to be making Athens what it could be. And there's a way in which, you know, that's my dream, is that I believe Athens can be whole. I believe that we can make an ethical community, and I believe in centering a whole Athens first, that as a guiding kind of light in all the decisions we make as a commission, that keeping money in Athens, keeping contracts in Athens, centering Athenian jobs, centering Athenian workers, centering Athenian business owners, that if you live and work in Athens, that we have you in our minds, and when we're making decisions, you come first, always, first and foremost. That we're not thinking about, people coming in for tourism, even though of course they get to come here. We're not thinking about people that live outside the county that come in and siphon all of our wealth. Like, no, like those people are fine. They get to live and do stuff too, but we are thinking about you first, Athens first. If you live here, if you work here, we're taking care of you and the decisions that we make. And too often I feel like we center everyone except Athenians when we make decisions. And that's our deficient politics are why we have such massive inequality. And we have to fix that. We have to, in one way, be selfish and think about Athens first. So you can check me out at AndreaForAthens.com and learn more about what I think about stuff.
And closing thoughts from you, Kamayu. Thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, am I on? Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Awesome. So first of all, Imani, I want to thank you for hosting and for having us and for asking the questions so beautifully. I couldn't help but give good answers. And thank the host for having this debate. It's important to make sure that our candidates are not just engaging with each other, but are also engaging with our citizens, engaging with our community. And now that we're all sheltered in place, this is about the only way that we can do it. So again, thank you all for that. Mm-hmm. That being said, Clark County is at such a pivotal place right now. And it's not just Clark County. Our state is in a pivotal place. Our nation is in a pivotal place where somehow along the way, the people that are supposed to be charged with our protection the most have lost sight of the fact that people should come first. I want to restore that, especially on the local level, and not just for people of a particular subset or the haves within our community, but also the have-nots. We all need to be in a place where we can understand each other, that we can visit the different issues of different communities, and we can all come together on resolutions that work for everybody. That's my entire goal in this race. I've said from the get-go, I want to be that bridge in the community that's standing in that divide, helping bring people together. That means making sure that people have access, making sure that we have allies from different parts of the communities, and making sure that we're accountable to everybody, not just a small subset of the constituency. So that being said, check out more about me at my website, www.kamayuhall.com. Thank you for having me, and everybody that's tuned in, thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Imani.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you everyone for listening. And I wish we could have you both and bump somebody else in another district.
Okay, we'll both be working. We're both going to keep fighting and working in Athens no matter what. So.
Yes, I love it. I think you all both did an excellent job, and would definitely encourage you to review this video and see if you can cut out some clips or something. Mm-hmm. Get some of these videos up for your own promotional purposes.
It'd be nice if the other candidate showed up.
We can end with that moment of silence for the other candidate. Thank you.
We could just paste her picture over here.
Yes. So thank you all again. And with that, I think we're done.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.